What are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? These words belong to the poet Mary Oliver, although one could argue that these words belong to all of us now. They came to her in a moment of total focus, perhaps a moment when she forgot her own name, her troubles, all of those persuasive neuroses, and was overcome with the rapture of living. And then these words permeated our collective consciousness by magic. When you hear these words now, it's as if nobody wrote them at all, as if the phrase has lived as long as the earth itself. But how can we know what to do with our precious lives, Miss Oliver? How can we wear our lives more lightly, yet feel them with greater richness? How can we honor ourselves without falling for the lie that we are privatized selves, existing separately from everyone else? How can we go on living in the face of death? How can we keep that spark alive, that magic and rapture, even as the years turn us over and over, marking us always, beating and withering us? Received wisdom maintains that life strengthens us, but I have never once felt toughened by a storm. To me, it seems that each slice of living only makes us more sensitive, another layer of skin having been removed. And so I am a girl in search of a spiritual practice that doesn't involve the G word, that is spiritual in the sense that it keeps my spirit alive, robust, strong, and dependable within the storm of life. In January of 2022, I felt a low ebb. I was falling regularly into anxiety and panic, partly freer than ever, partly devastated. Even writing and filming and all of the things that had once felt like decadent indulgences were beginning to feel weighed down by my doubts about life and about myself. And so I picked up a beautiful and at times enraging blue book, a cult classic, a spiritual text, a 1990s standard, The Artist's Way. The premise of The Artist's Way is that our creativity can be cultivated as a spiritual practice, that our fears around creating can be healed and replaced by a new relationship, in which art becomes what it was for so many of us as children, a sanctuary, something to save us again and again. I made it my goal to complete the 12-week course in its entirety, and in the messy and imperfect way of all things in life, it did begin to change me. The course and its prompts triggered a series of discoveries which have brought me closer than ever to a creativity that is truly a grounded, beautiful practice. One that I might use to keep that spark alive, so that my spirit is bolstered, capable of holding the grief it must learn to hold in this life, and capable too of the rapture, oh the rapture of living. But such ambitious commitments are hard to stick with alone. My wonderful experience in this course is thanks, at least in part, to Veronica. Every week we called for 2 hours, checked in with each other, enlightened each other. As the weeks drew on, the conversations began to flow easier, go deeper, so that I would come away from them inspired, invigorated, cathartically relieved, and emotionally spent with a pain in my chest. Julia Cameron believes that inside of all of us lives a creative spark, a playful, childlike artist who is injured by our struggles, self-doubt, and social conditioning. I went into this process hoping it would help me write and create more freely, but it has given me so much more than that. I believe that it has given me the tools to live a more wild and precious life. But let's start at the beginning.
Hi, I'm Veronica Viccora. I am a ballet dancer. I'm a creative all around, but yeah, my main passion right now is exploring the art of dance.
I am Veronica de Kleine-Phoenix. I am a writer and filmmaker.
Veronica and I have decided to share our journey together with you for the next 12 weeks. The topic of this week, our first ever check-in, was fear. The fears and learned feelings of inadequacy that hold us back. I hope you enjoy and that perhaps something of our journeys will resonate.
I really want to reconnect with my creativity. I think I've been very focused on the growth aspect of being online. It can take away your creative soul sometimes, so I want to find the creative Veronica again.
I've written 2 novels before and I did not like them. I think what happened is I kind of choked, and I think I'm sort of coming to this place where I'm like, my creativity has always been this kind of fantasy self. I want to be able to bring it into my real life and actually let myself be seen a little more. Allow that kind of inner voice that shows up in my diary and that shows up in my private creative stuff to just like come through, and to have that confidence to like sing out, Louise. Yeah, I'm just really interested in kind of cultivating creativity and writing practice as a form of self-care, really, and as something that can kind of weather me through things, or, you know, and I think a big shift I'm kind of going through in my life is, for the past 10 years actually, I've had this very debilitating illness, and for a long time curing it was a huge part of my raison d'etre. You know, so all of my self-care was always about getting to a point, and the point was being like able-bodied. I'm trying to kind of like reframe things as what's kind of, how do I take care of myself, not because I'm trying to win something, not because I'm trying to like get to a point, but as a kind of a devotional practice to life, you know, not because I think if I do the self-care things my life will be perfect, but because I love that it's imperfect and I accept that, and there's something that I can hold on to, you know, through all the seasons. And I think when I looked back, you know, writing has always been that thing that I was able to hold on to. And so cultivating that on purpose, I think, is what I'm really interested in.
Do you feel comfortable saying what your illness was?
Oh, yes, I still have it. But I'm like manifesting. It's called ME, which stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is almost as hard as my own name. The kind of the reality of it is that from the age of 14 onwards, I spent most of the time, like half of my time total, if not more, bedridden, including being in bed for years at a time. So when I was 14, that entire year, I was not unable to get out of bed, and the same thing happened when I was kind of like 18 and 19, and then the rest of the time it's more sporadic. I've had this like very weird path, and I think a life that sometimes is hard to kind of find reference points for, you know. Other people have these milestones that they can compare to each other's lives, because not everyone, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people I grew up around, you know, can kind of check their milestones against each other. And for me, it's never looked like the people around me. Kind of the beauty of that, in a way, is that when convention breaks up with you, you don't have to break up with convention. And breaking up with convention is hard. You know, it's the hardest thing. It's the biggest roadblock most people have. And like, convention dumped my ass before I'd even like kind of stop being a child. So that's kind of interesting in a way.
Okay, well, I started to dance when I was 5, and it was just this town program, and I fell in love with it immediately. It was like, this is where I need to be. I've always been very energetic. I've always had a lot of difficulty focusing in the traditional classroom setting. Like, I was always that kid that was humming in the middle of a test and getting in trouble for it, and, you know, just like can't sit still, always doing some kind of little jig. So I took my first ballet class at 5, and then my family couldn't afford to keep me in the classes anymore, because, you know, it wasn't really like real ballet school. It was just something that I had done through like a relatively affordable town program. So once that ended, I'm all ready and raring to go and be this dancer now. I felt like I had finally found my purpose. You know, at 5, I finally found my purpose. It was hard to not be able to go anymore, and understanding why we couldn't go and why other people could go. It was just all very confusing for me as a child growing up. I kind of learned some limiting beliefs there, that dancing and being a creative is a luxury that only certain people can afford, only certain people are born to do. I changed schools when I was pretty young. And something about that, I think it was just like the uprooting of everything I knew. I went to quite a small school, so everyone was like my family. I mean, I graduated from that school with like 4 other kids in my class, and I loved it there. And then once I left, my whole world was upside down, and I didn't feel very comfortable anymore. And I got really stuck inside myself. So I was painfully shy, and I had really bad stage fright, but I always had these dreams, like literal dreams at night of being on stage and singing and dancing in front of people. And it just like, it followed me my whole life. And then when I was 17, I auditioned for my high school's musical. I had never sang in front of anybody before, certainly never danced in front of anybody before. And I ended up getting the lead role, which is insane. That was a moment of crossroads for me, because it was like, am I gonna slip into fear and say, no, I can't do this? I was like gonna be excited if I got into the cast at all. I'm like, give me tree number 2. I could just stand in the back and I'll be like, hey, I'm waving my branches, you know? And I was never, ever, ever expecting things to go that way. So it totally changed my life. It gave me so much creative confidence. Yet again, it was like I was rediscovering who I was, my purpose. I was like, okay, she's back, she's here. So after that, I really wanted to start following my dance journey properly. And I knew that that was the piece that was holding me back from musical theater in general. So I was like, okay, I'm 17. I've got several different jobs. I can set aside the money and I can pay for dance school now. And I called up a bunch of studios. Small town, rural Long Island does not really offer a lot of adult classes. 17 is an adult. 17 is decrepit in the dance world, unfortunately. The studio owner told me that I was already too late. I was already too old. My bones would never be what a ballerina's bones were supposed to be. I developed all wrong. My muscles wouldn't be, there was basically just no point because I was too late. And now I would be like, fuck you. But at the time, I was just like, okay, this is a professional. This person knows more than I do. I just took her word as gospel and I went with it, and it gave me a limiting belief about, my capabilities. It just felt like I was always being punished for not starting sooner and never having the money. And, so just so much linked with my dance journey, my performance journey, at all my creative journey as a whole. And yeah, so after, becoming a yoga instructor for 6 years and traveling the world and really working on my mindset surrounding my creativity and all of that, I decided as an adult 10 years later that I'm just going to do it anyway. And I'm going to play by my own rules and I'm not going to let this stop me. So yeah, that's the very long-winded journey of why I'm here.
My first week doing the Artist's Way course was a little chaotic. We had back-to-back house guests, which was a nice distraction. I had just spent a month in Ireland where one of my favourite people had died. I was not exactly in love with life, but I was still committed to it. The first week of the Artist's Way course encourages us to find meaning and respite in the process of creation, rather than just judging the finished product. On the eve of turning 25 and feeling rather out of sorts, this was a concept I felt it was time to explore.
As you know, there's been a death in my family on New Year's Eve. So it's been very fresh. I've been crying in supermarkets. I've been kind of setting these goals for myself for very structured creative stuff this year.
Yeah.
And when I was back in Ireland, in the midst of all the family stuff, towards the end, I got into a really good cycle of spending a lot of the day at my desk writing and doing my bits, and it was so nice. It was such an anchor. So I got back here and there was someone staying in our house this weekend. There was other people staying in our house, so it has just been an interesting litmus test for how fast it all falls apart if I'm not structuring my life around sitting down and having my moment. Because this morning I was this is going to be a really useful before and after picture of the Artist's Way course. I was just walking around the streets. I was having a panic attack and I was this is the before pic.
Yeah. It's been really eye-opening for me because I deal with so much perfectionism, and this week especially, just starting everything, I've noticed the resistance. The resistance is so real, and it's crazy because I feel like going into this, not to toot my own horn, but I was just having this moment where I'm like, I do plenty of mindset work. I'm not a blocked artist. I'm good. Like, sure, I'll go through these little exercises, but what am I really going to unlock? And then as I'm going through them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many blurts, so many blocks, so many things I need to work through. And yeah, really took me off my high horse there.
This week, we had to complete exercises to start to unpack our creative fears, the things that might be holding us back. One of the most interesting questions was this idea of the Monster Hall of Fame. Though some human names came up for us, we ended up talking mostly about larger, invisible voices.
I get so much hesitancy in what I think I should do based on like my fear of like this very like carceral, very mean like moment we're in. It's not even something that like you've gotten it with dance and stuff. I haven't even gotten it that much, but I can just always imagine all the ways that people will want to tear down what I'm doing. I think I've seen so much of it, and like I always get completely terrified of creativity when I see someone else being torn, like some random famous person or whatever, like when I see them being picked apart and criticized within an inch of their life, and when I see fiction being picked apart, but like especially because I think with videos and stuff, like I put so much myself in it that I'm always like, it's me who's going to be picked apart. And I'm just like, I have that in my head, and I think it's funny because in reality, like at this level, when you're not making things for big audiences and stuff, like there, people aren't necessarily hyper analyzing you. But I've seen so many of my favorite artists online at this point disappear because they were being so absolutely cruelly taken apart that I think I have a real, like, legitimately intense fear of that.
I mean, that's the thing that's so frustrating. You don't realize that when you're insulting someone or criticizing someone about the way they look or who they are or what they're doing or what they're not doing, not only is that criticizing and affecting that person, it's affecting all the other people that might see that and think that too. And that's why, like, when I have gotten criticism about my being a dancer, being a real dancer or not, it would be very upsetting to me, and a lot of the people surrounding me would say, don't even engage with it. What's the problem? Just ignore it. It's a troll. It's someone who doesn't matter. But I made a choice that I am going to respond to it in a very certain way, because I'm not responding to it necessarily just for me, because of my own catharsis that I need, but because anybody else reading that they see it and they go, see, I'm not a real dancer either, or I'm not a real ballerina, or I'll never be a ballerina, or it is too late for me, or I'm never going to look perfect. I want them to see this is how you respond to that. You don't need to just take it as face value, and you also don't need to argue. It is a person who doesn't necessarily understand, but that's okay. I don't want the person that I imagine as like the old version of me that was so insecure, and then all of their insecurities were validated from a comment like that. I just want to nip that in the bud. Okay, well, yeah, most of mine will need to be edited out. There's one I don't mind sharing publicly. The algorithm. I am trying to work with it more and understand it more and not allow that to become such a reason for me to not do things and to hold me back. But it really does frustrate me sometimes how, like, I think you make such beautiful videos. I love your work so much. I feel like the really creative people that I love, like there's you and there's like a couple of other creators that I love, and it's like, why is the world just not obsessed with this? And like, even with myself, it's like anytime I try and do something experimental, I feel like, well, it's going to be a waste of time because it's not going to be picked up by the algorithm, and I've got to title it a certain way, and I've got to do this. And, on the one hand, I really grapple with, I have messages that I really want to share with people, and I see my time as quite valuable, and I want all of this to be worth something. Therefore, I want to share my message with as many people as I can. But then in order to do that, I've got to sort of play by these rules, and I'm not a natural rule follower.
I think, again, it's this question of like, what, I just think about the duende thing all the time and the flamenco dancer, like, why are we artists? It's because we have this really like deep and ineffable thing we need to communicate that can't be communicated in words, so it's like, it's not enough for us to kind of communicate in the normal ways. We have to express something and we need to investigate it a little deeper and all these things, and it's like, that doesn't fit into an algorithm. The algorithms aren't for art, they're for marketing. It's a different world. It's a cynical world, and it's the world that creates the kind of the oppressive, hegemonic, like everyone has to look the same, everyone has to think the same because your marketing demographics. Like it's the world that I'm trying to like liberate myself from and my mind from when I go to the page or when I film or whatever. And so like for me lately, I mean, I definitely think I've been like, screw the algorithm. Like the worse it does, the better. I think there is a healthy medium because I'm just trying not to be murdered in the village square. Like I'm not sure I'm in a moment in my life where I really want to be seen, but I'm trying to go the other way. I'm trying to like, stick my head above the parapet. But yeah, like it's like, how do you win that one? And you don't want to be always marketing yourself, and you don't always want to be making it digestible.
I think like the Capricorn in me, the like business savvy person in me, sees that there actually is an art to marketing. It actually does work in a way, because now I'm able, like I said, I'm able to get my message to more people. I'm able to connect with someone like you. But then at what point is it like, okay, but I just can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, because that's what works and people want to see. Like there also needs to be me in these things, and we are evolving creatures. So I'm not the same person I was 2 minutes ago, let alone 2 weeks ago or a year ago, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So like I see how much creative freedom I can have with it. And I also grew up in a time where like YouTube was a very different place, and there was so much more like experimentation. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just doesn't feel creatively authentic. And yeah, so I'm sort of trying to rage against that.
What's so interesting about this course is the idea of, creativity as a practice that you do for yourself, because going into it, I was thinking like, if I could be so sure that it was always going to be about the kind of the call to express oneself, and then, the other kind of like the other part of what I think creative integrity is, which is like a certain selflessness, which sounds strange, but like a certain like, I'm going to say what I needed to hear, or I'm going to like embody what is scary to me to embody, because maybe we don't see it a lot, but like it'll that's a liberation, because it's all kind of like, I feel like a lot of creativity is like adding towards like a larger arc of like liberating ourselves as like people. But I think like if I could remove the emotional connection to like how the internet numbers it around or whatever, and like if I just always remember like I'm doing my part, and like all that needs to happen, all this needs to be successful to me is to like say what I needed to say, and to like capture a little bit of the magic I was trying to capture. And like I think I'm working on that, and I'm getting better at kind of always going back to like, am I making this, like am I editing this in such a way that it's kind of true to what I wanted to express, or am I doing it because I want to emulate the people who are successful or whatever.
I think I've come to the point of realization where just because a video doesn't get a lot of views or something, that doesn't have to mean that it's bad or it didn't work. The way that I'm trying to think of it now is there's certain things that I do where I do expect it to help me find people. Shorts do really well to just like get picked up by the algorithm, and then lots of people will find me. And then it's like I might make a long form video where it really is me. I feel like it's authentic, and not a lot of people will watch it, or not a lot of people will watch it all the way through, or people will be mad at me because of my editing style, or yada yada yada. But I do think that it works, because the people who will watch it all the way through and who will resonate with that, it's like, well, it wasn't for anybody other than you. And if you watched it and you loved it and we can connect because of that, then that's the important thing.
Also, I think it's really funny because like my most viewed video is like a Mamma Mia lookbook. The YouTube algorithm is not my intended audience.
Exactly.
I'm too sophisticated for the YouTube algorithm. It's just that, oh my god, the Tinta de Verano is hitting.
My last creative monster, I spoke about her. She's the woman from the dance studio that told me, you know, basically there's no point. And it's really a very interesting concept for me, how much I let a person that I never even saw her face, like I don't even know who she was, I don't know her name, this is just a random person that I spoke to on the phone pretty briefly, and I let that control nearly a decade of my life. She spoke to the fears that I was already having, and she just gave life to it, and the resistance of my brain was like, okay, see, yep, that's all we needed. It was that confirmation that we had been waiting for, and once I got it, it was like, you know, that's it. I just didn't even question it after that. Since I don't really know her, I decided to give her a name, Ms. Vicky. Nothing against anybody with the name Vicky, but that is what people call me all the time when they can't remember my name, and it becomes quite annoying to me. So I felt like it was kind of this antithesis of me, like the evil person in my brain that's not me but is like pretending to be me, that is like, you can't do this, you need to be perfect, like just the amalgamation of all the worst parts of myself. I'm like, that's Ms. Vicky, and I don't want to be Ms. Vicky anymore.
That's so good. Oh my god. Okay, fantastic. I want to Miss Vicky. I'm gonna anthropomorphize my own. It's great work. Genius, you've cracked it. Oh, fantastic.
I don't see her as this like big energy in my life that is just ruining everything and making it so that I can't follow my dreams. I'm like, she's just that little bitch.
That's really profound though, like that realization that like someone who you've never met, whose name you don't know, like kind of dictated like a decade of your life almost. Like that's so amazing.
Yeah, and I mean I think it's worth discussing because I don't think that I'm the only person who's done something like that. Like what you were even talking about before, of how you're afraid of the things that people haven't even said yet.
And as I was writing out the words that I was afraid of hearing, I was like, whoever would say this is not only an asshole, but like has a very like different fundamental philosophy than I do. So like, why am I listening to them? Like in this theoretical world that I'm afraid of.
Exactly. So, okay, I was having this conversation with a friend one time, and then this other person who was in the room that I quite frankly wish wasn't in the room, but you know, they were there. And I'm having a conversation, you know, A and B, right? And then C is over here and is like being super rude, is not even paying attention. They're just on their cell phone the entire time. And then they just look up, they like, you know, come up from the water of their distraction just to insert themselves into this conversation, just to be like, you're wrong, you're an idiot. And it was just kind of like, in my head, I'm thinking like, I'm not even taking you seriously because I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to her. You've been rude, like you have not been engaged, and we're just talking about something so innocuous. So now when I experience hate comments, I'm just like, it reminds me of that person where it's like, I know that I have something to share and I'm having a conversation with someone. I know exactly who I want to talk to and what I want to talk to them about. And if there's other people over here that don't get it, they're like, you're not a real ballerina. You're not a real dancer. I don't like you. I don't like what you're wearing. I don't like how you don't turn out. I don't like how you don't do this. It's just like, okay, you have a right to your opinion, but I'm very clear that I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people that get it.
My friend Mariam, like we talked a lot about this idea of being misunderstood and the fear of being misunderstood. I remember talking to Mariam and saying like, well, actually the world has a very narrow imagination. Like we, especially like for women, we have a very narrow imagination of what that can be. And we have a very narrow imagination for what a queer person can be. And we have a very narrow imagination for what people of color and immigrants can be. And we have a very narrow imagination for what a disabled life can look like. And
Yeah.
so if people are deeply, deeply misunderstanding you and just kind of can't get a grasp on you, it can feel like you've done something wrong, but in many ways it's probably a sign you've done something right. Like you kind of want to be living a life that's beyond the collective imagination, because the
Yes.
collective imagination isn't great.
Oh my gosh. So you're talking about someone getting frustrated that you're not playing by the rules. This is exactly what I've dealt with so much since I've started actually sharing about my dance journey. One thing about ballet is that it's very technically precise and it can attract the perfectionists like myself because there is a right way to do things. And I think that's wonderful and I think that can be beautiful in its own right. But because of that, people who have grown up in that industry their whole life have been taught that there is one very specific path, there's one definition of what a ballerina is and looks like. And, you know, everything from her physical form and her body to what she does with that body and how she does it. And there's arguments over whether this port de bras is right or whether this tendu is correct. And it's like so many things that we get so far away from. Dancing is just the expression of life. That's all it is. And I don't want my life to be perfect. My dancing will never look perfect because my life is never going to be perfect. When I started to share about my journey, the first thing that I started to get was criticism about the fact that I'm not a real ballerina. I'm a fraud. I'm a poser. I don't have a right. And actually, what I found most interesting is the idea that me calling myself a ballerina, even though, yeah, I'm not professional, I'm not that great yet, I'm an adult, I'm a beginner, all of these things, it somehow takes away from the work that these other ballerinas, that the professional real ballerinas have put in. Me doing this thing over here takes it away from them. I think that's such an interesting concept because that's one of those things where it's like everything is scarce. You know, there's a certain amount of realness that ballerinas and writers and artists can have. And if you're not it, you're not it. When I came to terms with it, I realized I'm angering people because I'm not playing by the rules. Instead of me telling myself, I can never be a dancer, it's too late. I just wasn't meant to be a dancer. I don't look like one. I didn't start like one. So now, oh, that means I'm not playing by the rules, so I don't get to play the game at all. And I just decided to make up my own rules and say, no, I'm not playing that. I'm going to do it anyway. And you hold up a mirror to people when you do that and you show them what's possible and what has been possible for them all this time. And I think we love our excuses. We love our limiting beliefs because it means you don't have to do all the hard work that it takes to show up in a New York City ballet class as an adult and look like a fool all the time. That's so much nicer than being like, yeah, I'm going to do all this hard work and I'm going to be embarrassed every week, but I love it and that's who I am.
So the bread and butter of the Artist Way program is basically that for 12 weeks, while you do these interrogations and answer these questions, do these readings, learn these new concepts, you are doing daily morning pages and weekly artist states. An artist state is basically where you take your creativity, your playfulness, your inspiration, wherever it wants you to go, actively seeking out and courting your inner sense of wonder for the world, I guess.
I did do my artist date. I took myself to a healing sound bath and restorative yoga class. It was really more that my sister had invited me to go. I was going to be on Long Island with her anyway, and I was like, I think this would make the perfect artist date. So I just said yes. I noticed that it was very, very challenging for me to quiet my brain. It's interesting because I did teach yoga for 6 years and now I haven't taught or really been into my practice as much in many years. And I'm like, wow, I really lost the ability to meditate here. So, but oh yeah, and then one thing I really wanted to say is that it was such a beautiful experience because they gave us these little coins, these little meditation coins with a lotus on them. And she said that the significance of the lotus is that it grows out of the mud. So it's kind of like a symbol for resilience and strength and all of that. And that beauty can be found even in the, some very unbeautiful places. And I just really resonated with that. I've been thinking about that all week through my morning pages and my affirmations and everything, because I feel like January has been a lot of mud. It's nice to know that I'm like, okay, I'm a lotus. This is what is helping me grow, and we can do this. And it's actually interesting because whenever I get really overwhelmed, I constantly tell my husband, Jeff, I just feel like I'm moving through mud. Like I just feel like everything is heavy and sticky, and it feels like moving through mud. And so then to have this affirmation of, but lotuses grow from the mud, it was such a beautiful, it just felt like such a message to me of like, it's okay. You're becoming that lotus flower. This is part of your journey. And I've been working a lot with that in my morning pages and my affirmations and my blurts and all of that. So I found that to be just my perfect little artist day.
When my partner's friends were over this weekend, we went up to see a flamenco show in the caves. And Granada, which is where I am, is where flamenco comes from, the dance form. And it comes from this area called Sacromonte, which is like a hill behind the city. And it's this really gorgeous, deeply spiritual music form. They were using the word Allah, like for God. And when Spanish people say ole, when they're watching dance or whatever, they're actually shouting Allah, because what's happening is it's a moment in the dance where it's like the performer disappears and they're just a channel for something, and people are like, I can see it, I can see what you're channeling, and so they scream Allah, and then it became ole. And when you hear them say it in the cave, it does sound a little bit more like Allah than ole, actually, the way they pronounce it. But walking up and being in this cave and listening to this music, it was so moving. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. It was like, I was just like, this might be my favorite form of dance. Like, I was just enraptured by it and I couldn't take my eyes off. I don't know how choreographed it is. I don't know enough about it yet. This one woman was dancing, and I think she kind of decided to keep going. Like, she was really feeling it, and she just didn't stop. And the music stopped and it quietened down because the music was all live, and she was doing this amazing rhythmic footwork. She was making music with her feet, and she was frowning and concentrating, and she was just, you could just tell she was in her own zone. It wasn't like a Broadway dancer who's doing their big performer's grin. It's intense and their brows are furrowed. She was doing this funny thing with her mouth, which was very unself-conscious, because it was like she was so in her little zone that she was making all these kind of slightly unattractive I mean, they were gorgeous because of how beautiful it was, but these kind of these faces that you wouldn't necessarily make if you thought everyone was looking at you. Like she was kind of her mouth, she was frowning, and her mouth was kind of opening and closing, and she was kind of talking to herself a little bit, and it was just really interesting, because I was like, this is a form of performance that's so about this inner journey and this inner channeling, and it's so palpable, and it's so kind of not, I mean, they're all dressed up and they're all absolutely gorgeous, but it's kind of not vain or something, or it's kind of not self-conscious. It's just I'm going to channel this thing, and isn't that amazing that I can do that? And it's about their skill, but it's so much also about their inner journey as they do it, and the passion and everything. They have a term here called duende, which is kind of when a creative flow almost. It's the word for that kind of phenomenon of there's something in the room, when you're playing music with someone and there's just something about it where it's just oh, we've tapped into something here and it's all flowing so perfectly. I just thought, for what we're discussing and what I'm trying to think about in this period of my life, it's just perfect. The art that I love and that makes me want to be an artist is the art that speaks to the part of me that I don't feel comfortable necessarily. I think I do kind of live it out now. I'm getting better at that, but these kind of things that I can't explain, or these kind of relationships I have with the world and with being alive. Sometimes when something really takes my breath away, like a poem or something, or when I get into a really good journaling session, it's like that kind of that crescendo that this woman was doing with her feet. Like I'm concentrated and I'm lost and I'm almost disappearing, and her feet were getting faster and faster, and the rhythm, it was like coming to a climax. It was like urgent and rushed and like completely, like everything else went away. And she couldn't have done that if she was trying to look, trying to keep her face composed, if she was trying to do a maybe more Western, more, Northwestern European kind of performance of, I'm not going to be scrunching my face, and I'm not going to be letting people see me have this really intimate moment with myself. I'm going to be, performing. And you can perform writing, you can write in a way that makes people think you're clever and that makes people think you're not weird, and like that's very self-sheltering. And you can do that with video too, and it's something that I struggle with, is like not entirely having the confidence to be fully authentic and fully weird. But then I'm like, well, I can't make it if I'm not going to be fully weird, because I can't make something that's so myself and lie. Like that would be the opposite of what creativity is for me. That would be like a self-annihilation almost. There's just something about that image of that woman and how lost she was in her own art, and how we were all there witnessing it, and how it was just this like really interesting ancient spiritual experience for everyone, that I just am like, that's it, that's creativity, that's like can we just all do that?
I have chills, especially as a dancer. I'm like, I must see a flamenco show now. What am I doing with my life? Well, I am not a writer. I mean, I write all the time, but I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, I'm a writer. That's my main.
Boo! Call yourself a writer. If you write all the time, you're a writer. What kind of attitude is that?
But I felt also very connected, because being that, we're going through this journey together, you as the writer for all intents and purposes, me as the dancer for all intents and purposes. But I do think it's really great that, so much of this asks me to mirror your practice, and then you had an artist state that sort of mirrored my practice. So it's great. It's all meshing together.
Clicking reminded me that in this course, there's loads of the affirmations involve God, and I was like, interesting. I'm not sure I totally know what I believe in, so if I just like say that out loud, it's going to feel really inauthentic. So I was like, how am I going to work my way around this? Like, because she said you can change the word to whatever word you want, and I was like, okay, but then I was like, what word am I going to use? Like, I have a week to work out my entire like metaphysical belief system. I thought about this time I saw a recording of the Patti LuPone, the actress and singer. She was doing a performance where she sang A Boy Like That from West Side Story. She sang both sides of the song. And there's a bit where in the original score it goes up really high, and there's just one really high note in the song. And for whatever reason, she didn't want to go that high, so she just did a click. And I was just like, okay, if there's a word that I don't know exactly what I'm, like I love the energy of it, but I'm not sure what I want to say, I'm just gonna click. When doing my affirmations like this, I am a channel for creativity, and my work comes to good.
So sassy too, like
I am willing to let create through me. I think even if you are comfortable with the word God, you should try this, because it makes you feel so powerful. You're like, yeah, I am letting move through me. And also thinking about how, like, when someone's saying something they agree with, we all click.
Yeah, and we just did that before. I snapped at you.
Exactly. And I was like, it's kind of like our version of when Spanish people kind of scream ole in the middle of a flamenco dance. Like, I was like, it is kind of, in a funny way, the way we click at slam poetry is kind of our culture's way of acknowledging divinity in a piece of work.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this is actually a valid way of describing the muse, just clicking. One of my other New Year's resolutions, which is a little eccentric for someone of our generation, is that I'm completely detoxing for the year from kind of like entertainment. So I'm not watching like TV or anything. I'm not listening to podcasts, which is a little eccentric of me, just for the year, because I wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't. I feel like creatively and also just as a person, I'm deeply influenceable.
Yeah, we all are.
It just felt chaotic. It just felt like every week I was a different person, and I was like, I'd feel like I'd found something, and then I was like over here, and I was being influenced by all these things. I didn't know like who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be creating, and also just like what I feel about the world. And And also there was too much emotional stuff coming up that I was not that I was able to not feel, because I could, turn on a podcast or something and distract myself, or turn on a film and distract myself. So I had these silly little rules, like I'm allowed to watch a film in a cinema or like with someone on a sofa, but like when I'm on my own, I can't be leaving the moment. I want to sit with myself for a year. So I've been doing that, raw dogging life. Nothing between me and the moment. Like, let's do this.
I want that on a t-shirt. Hi, I'm raw dogging life. I totally understand that, like, feeling like you're a different person every week because of your influences and everything. Totally agree with the feeling like you found something and then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's trash because now I found this other thing. And I think all the time, like, my grandmother was not doing the laundry, just like listening to a constant stream of podcasts. People used to be a lot more okay with silence. At least, I mean, maybe I'm just romanticizing it, but I am very curious to see. Please report back how that goes for you.
When you tell the story of like, well, I had an illness and then I had to learn about this, I had to accept this about myself or whatever. Like, we all have those stories, but I was like, in some ways, they're only partially true, because there's this, for me, like this constant stream of entertainment is this kind of sort of coping mechanism for life, where like you can exit anything at any time in some ways. You can, if a moment's uncomfortable, you can just direct your attention elsewhere. And I just was kind of like, there's things about life that I've been given this lesson a lot of times. Like, life keeps trying to teach me these things and I keep being confronted by these same problems, and I'm not really learning the lessons, or I feel like I could be progressing in a more like intelligent way. And part of me was like, is this because like life only has half my attention? Because it's so easy for me to, like, when something's uncomfortable and I'm having that growth moment, to like look the other way. So exactly, raw dogging life.
One of the final exercises of the week was to write a letter to the editor in your own defense. As in, dear sir or madam, this mean voice in my head is saying this, but it's not freaking true. I would encourage anyone interested to try this one in particular. Defend yourself against the critic in your head. Stand up to the bully, baby.
Dear whoever is reading this, it has come to my attention that Ms. Vicky is an elitist snob who wouldn't know her ass from her elbow, and certainly didn't know what you were made of. She thinks she's better than everyone because she started at age -5, but unfortunately, in all her dance training, she never quite learned how to be a nice person. How unfortunate for her. Love, Veronica, the ballerina who can too dance as an adult.
That was so good. Oh my god, I got lost in the reads of mine. Mine's not nearly as funny and sassy as that. Like, this is who I am. No notes are being taken at this time.
Doesn't it feel so good to get to that point?
God, listen, am I manifesting a little? Yes. Am I there? Not entirely sure, but I'm certainly faking it till I make it.
Exactly that. Hey, that's how it starts. It's so much better than letting all of these things just like infest into the corners of your brain and you don't even know that they're there. Like, you're bringing them out into the light. We're bringing them into the light. And now it might not be, we might not perfectly believe it just yet, but it's a hell of a lot better than living however we were living before.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Art Therapy. The course we are following is based on the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. If you would like to continue to follow us on this journey, you can find us every week for 12 weeks straight, alternating between Veronica's channel, Veronica Viccora, and my channel, The Prime of Life. You can also click here to gain access to the full playlists of episodes in order. Links to our channels, as well as our various other outlets, and to the Artist's Way book in both audio and PDF form, can be found in the description. Until next time, sending love.
I'd also like to tell the people at home that it's like 8:30, like in the evening, or 8 in the evening here. So you're probably having a coffee, like.
I have my tea. I'm so not opposed to having a glass of wine it's currently 2 p.m. for me in New York. It is dreary, it is rainy. She is cramping and PMSing today, so I needed some tea.
We're really serving our respective, like, discipline. Like, I'm like the European alcoholic writer. You're the ballerina with her bun and her herbal tea. I don't know how long issues.